Welcome to Tech Smarter. My name is Abby Ritchie. I'm the tech guru at the Smarter Service, and you can find me right here every Wednesday talking with people who are actively improving the lives of older adults. It's an exciting place to be, and I couldn't be more thrilled to share my guests with you today. But before we get started, I want to thank Leading Age Arizona for sponsoring Tech Smarter and to the Smarter Service for producing this episode. And if you happen to be a senior living operator and you're struggling with the questions that your residents have around their technology, and we know their questions have questions, right? I'd like you to reach out to me on LinkedIn because we have professionalized this type of service. Now, without further ado, I would like to bring on my guest today, David Koelling. David, welcome to Tech Smarter.
Thanks, Abby. I appreciate it. Nice to be here.
Thank you. For anyone who's not familiar with what you do, would you please share a little bit about your backstory and how you came to find strategic dining services?
Well, sure. Briefly, I started my career as a chef and restaurateur and still am in a bit of the restaurant business. So as a chef and as an operator, at some point, I made the move and got my foot in the door into senior living, which really changed my direction and changed the outcomes. Worked for years as an operator in the senior living space with a large company that grew from about 40 to over 100 communities while I was there. And during that time, we got to see how dining was operated in those buildings that we acquired along that growth path. And so we saw a lot of different approaches with management companies, with self-operators, with full service management companies, with consultants and so on. And at that point, kind of came up with this idea that there's a void in the industry in terms of providing help and resources and tools for dining and senior living, because we know it can use the help. But how can you do that without selling your soul, let's say? How can you do that without farming out such a critical component? For most operators, it's the biggest expense department they operate, and arguably one of the biggest drivers of resident satisfaction that we have. So how can I improve? How can I enhance? How can I develop my team without selling that to someone else? I want my vision. I want my direction, to carry us forward. And so that's how strategic dining services came to be. We built a model that relies on our clients' vision and expectations so that we can build a support program around that and provide them with the tools, from technology to hip training to whatever their needs or focus or outcomes are. We build that program and then work alongside them to build those outcomes.
And so you work alongside them so that their vision fits into your ability to serve them. Is that correct?
Exactly correct. And that's why when people ask, so tell me a little bit about your model. Well, it really depends on the client's model to start with, right? What are their needs? What's their vision? Where do they want to be a year from now, 3 years from now, so that we can build a program to get them there? And as you can imagine, in this industry, we have clients whose needs are very, very different. One is financially driven. The next one is quality driven. The next one is people driven, and any combination of those. So we wait to understand the philosophy and the real culture of our clients so that we can build the appropriate program to get their desired outcomes.
And that's actually quite similar to the way the Smarter Service works within different senior living communities. Every senior living community is different. They're going to have different needs. Some of their residents at one community might be more tech savvy than residents at another community. And so we like to say we're very bendy, like we're going to adapt to what the community's needs are. And sometimes they have a very adept IT department, and sometimes they need someone who's a little more emotionally invested in helping residents rather than just intellectually. So it sounds kind of similar. And I wanted to know, in terms of, let's just say, a high tech investment and evolution, how can high tech backend in a kitchen enhance a resident's experience and make it feel more personal and human?
Well, that's such a good question, Abby, because we always are discussing this notion that technology is going to dehumanize the outcomes, right? And we're in an industry where the last thing we need to do is have less and less human contact. That's what we do, right? So how can we leverage that technology to do the opposite, have the opposite effect? And certainly back of the house technology in a lot of different forms, from we can talk about reservation systems to point of sale to high-tech kitchen gadgets, from high-speed cooking to even very high-tech holding equipment now, all will enhance the outcome of that experience. I think the biggest change has been the evolution in our industry of the acceptance of handheld ordering devices, POS systems in the dining room.
Yeah.
Because now we go from an absolute instantaneous delivery of that order into the kitchen, and we take away what we have seen and we still see occasionally, which is an order taker on a pad who then goes to a terminal, who then inputs that into a terminal that then prints out into the kitchen. So we've got these two spots in that process that are heavily susceptible to error, to mistakes. When I'm writing it down, then I can't read it, then I have to input it. So we eliminate that process, right? So now we get more accurate. But the biggest win in our industry that we've seen is that handheld device. Because of its speed, we immediately have orders into the kitchen. That's just maybe a few minutes, but it's a big few minutes, and particularly how our clients staff. Sometimes I'm visiting 2 tables before those orders get in. God forbid I visit 3 or 4 tables before I load those orders in. Now they're going in as I place them, and the kitchen gets a head start on that. My accuracy goes up. But the big driver here is, if done well, if done in a system where I not only incorporate that handheld device with my staffing levels, but then I also create a runner system, so that now coming out of the kitchen, I have a person or people, depending on the scope, whose only job is to bring food, hot food, right to the table, cold food right to the table as soon as it's ready to be served. This then allows servers to stay in the dining room at all times. There's no need for a server to ever leave the dining room. You can imagine what that face time improvement does to the quality of service and the human aspect of the hospitality experience, that I am always there and always available. And we drill down on one thing. The technology is a great starter, but how about eye contact? What are we looking at our residents? Are we seeing who needs something? And allowing them to stay in that dining room, it can change staffing patterns 20% for some clients. In other words, a reduction of staff by 20% because our servers are now on the floor. And if you've ever been in a senior living operation and walked into a dining room to see 1 or 2 servers and then to find 9 in the kitchen, you'll know exactly what I mean. All those eyeballs now back in the dining room, we've changed the tone, we've changed the feel, and of course the caliber of service, is huge.
Yeah, we also have a very similarly aligned mission, by using technology to create deeper human connections. And like you said early on, it's not about taking the human out of the equation. It's about programming and systemizing areas in which the human, the server, is taken out of the equation. And I just think that is a beautiful usage of the innovation. So good. I know that you guys help communities successfully self-operate. How does your technology give independent communities the same operational power as one that is a massive corporation running many hundreds of communities?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what we do. I mean, that's the whole point, is that we work only with self-operators. And so those go from single operations, one standalone community, to clients who have over 100, hundreds plus communities nationally. So what we do is exactly your point, is that we leverage that scope, our client scope, which is national from Hawaii to Maine. We now can give to each individual operator. So they don't have to be big, multi-unit operators to benefit from the technology and systems and programs and purchasing power that we bring, because we spread it across our portfolio, which allows everyone to leverage it on a grand scale. So now, you can have technology that you really thought either was completely unavailable to you or that you couldn't afford, because we can leverage that and bring it to life within the communities.
Speaking of affording, with inflation and supply chain issues hitting everyone, how does having a real-time data dashboard help operators with ending the guessing and beginning making smart purchasing decisions?
Well, at its core, the first thing that jumps to mind is I have real-time access now to the cost environment, right? So I can see when prices are going up or going down and take advantage of those. If I have a really well-designed menu program and plan, I can also plan according to, seasonality and to typical spike periods. Around the holidays, I know premium items are going to be high. How can we build that in and make sure that it's, our people can pick up on it? But it's also the real-time aspect of it allows us to manage today's cost environment rather than ending the end of the month and saying, wow, we didn't do very well. It's too late, right? It's over. That month is gone and we weren't able to adapt. By understanding where we stand today in real time and with good budget tools that are incorporated into our system, we can see exactly where we stand and see what modifications are needed. Look, what we've gone through in the last couple of years, it's hard for any operator to say, boy, we made budget perfectly. Our dining operations were right on the button. If they were, they cheated, because you can't write a menu right now that 10 months from now is going to work with the scope of inflation and price changes and availability and all of the issues that we've been through for the last 5 years from all sorts of issues with supply chain and just inflation. So you've got to
not to mention how unusual the delivery system was during COVID, right? I know I was fortunate enough to have access to a couple of the communities I was working at that time. And I know that everything was being delivered at that time, right? Almost like room service style. And so having to take that into consideration in such a challenging time was just massive.
So it is still a hangover for most of our operators. They're still feeling the effects of that meal delivery system and getting residents back into the dining room, back to the socialization part of what we do. That's been a real struggle, and we still see it. We see, to-go levels higher than, they've been in years, and that never happened until COVID. And we've got to continue to work to make those dining rooms more accessible and more enjoyable for the residents, because we know that interaction is so key for them.
What makes for a more enjoyable dining experience for residents?
Well, the number, like the two top things that we hear, of course, are variety as the driver and consistency. Hot food, hot, cold food, cold, right? So they want that variety. And here's what's interesting, Abby, is that a lot of operators hear that residents want more variety. So they build and engineer bigger menus. So now there are more choices, right? We offer more, looks great. The residents are happier for about a month. But then they want more change, right? We've got to see some new things. So variety in the senior living space does not come from the scope of the menu. It comes from change. So we can have a very narrow menu, very well engineered. And when I talk about engineered, I'm talking about things like, when we look at that menu process, are we putting two high production items on the same night? Are we doing two high cost or two low cost items on the same night? How can we engineer these things to be most efficient so that we can get them out of the kitchen effectively, we can plate them properly, and so on? But through that process, how can we get variety? And variety comes from that change, so that every week, what's new on the menu? What's different? What have our residents not seen? And we encourage them all the time in leaders, both in dining and at the community level. Don't worry that they don't love it or they're not excited to see it. If you put sushi on the menu and your residents say, what? I don't want sushi. That's okay. They'll remember it and they'll know that you're changing and innovating. The success is in the trying more than anything, because that registers to them that there is innovation and we always see something new and we still have our staples.
And they will always have their comments, won't they?
Of course, we can't escape that. What we want them to do is talk about the right things, though, and say, that, I've never had that before, or that's something we never grew up having, or, as long as the discussion isn't about the quality and execution of the food, and it's more cultural in aspect, then we know we're really winning.
Have you seen a lot of changes in the menu engineering software over the years?
Well, absolutely. It's really evolving, and particularly just within the last few years. And that's something that we work very hard on, are very proud of, because the biggest change we see is how menu design is now built in to the entire ecosystem of technology. Whereas in the past, you could find a good POS system, you could probably find a good menu management system, maybe an inventory, purchasing. Well, now all of those are built into one ecosystem, so that inventory talks to the menus talk to the production detail, and so on, so that when we have a change from a market fluctuation, that can filter through the entire process. When we want to make a change on a menu, that filters through then into the inventory and the purchasing side of things. So now we're more streamlined. The staff is much more effective, and we free them up to do the things that really make a difference.
Talking about the staff, culinary teams see a lot of turnover. What is your strategy for introducing new technology to a kitchen without causing a lot of staff resistance?
Well, the first thing that we do, particularly with a new client, and a question that comes out with every client as we're in this process of getting to understand their culture and what they'd like to see, is what is your tolerance for change? Your team, your people. How much resistance is there going to be to this process? And then, of course, once we get into a position where we're working alongside the team in the early stages, we can get a sense of their technology sophistication, right? And so we then have to plan a process where we dole that out, that innovation, the new tech, into that operation as needed, as their ability to absorb it,
Right.
Equals that rollout. And the second piece of that is that we also have to have enough hands on site for the training and coaching. We're in a technology world right now where I buy a new system or program, and where do I go to get my help? It's a YouTube video or the help desk. And
yeah,
I don't know about you, but it never jives with what I'm looking at or what my problem is. And so for us, one of our successes in our partnership with our clients is that we provide that hands-on. There's somebody sitting there next to the terminal for the first 10 days saying, no. Okay, here's the workaround for that. Here's where you're going to go to get this information. And here's how you have to put it in, and so on. So I think those two things, really understanding their taste and ability to change and to absorb the technology, and then planning appropriately look, it's going to take you a year to roll this out because we're going to start with menu management first. We're going to do purchasing. And, we're not going to get to POS until 8 months from now. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we get those, in a row, and that we're going to be there for that process.
Yeah. Another thing that's come up a lot is the new boomer population generation that is so highly tech literate. How is that changing what they expect from senior dining, everything from reservations to dietary tracking?
Well, it's interesting. For us, it's a boom. We love the more tech savvy residents in our communities, and it is fascinating how they differ so greatly from community to community, from location to location. We have communities with residents who are very, very savvy, and others who are just not there yet at all. So again, we have to apply standards a little differently according to need. But those tech savvy individuals open up a world of opportunities for us in the simplest ways of just being able to provide the support and services now online or on their phone. So now they can go in and place a to-go order on their phone. It's a game changer for them and for us, right? Rather than a phone call, writing it down, turning into the kitchen, getting the timing. I mean, everything now is in the system, and it allows them to order it at any time they want also, right? So it does so many things. Kiosks now we're starting to see in senior living. Why? Because now we have tech savvy residents who don't mind placing an order, right? You can go up to a kiosk, read it, understand it, work their way through it. And by the way, this is not to mean that kiosk ordering is going to be the end all be all in senior living. It's just not. But if I have a busy little deli or grill and I can take 20% of my customers, 30%, and have them use the kiosk, I've now freed up that front desk area to, again, become more personal, more interactive with those residents who do need the help, who do need to be coached through the process, and so on. So here's a case where like high tech delivers a more intimate outcome. And those who want that tech solution, we can now provide it. I would say only 10 years ago, there just wasn't enough demand or interest in some of those pieces of technology to make a difference. And I will tell you too, I think that the biggest driver, the biggest opportunity for most operators from a small piece of technology is the reservation system. They're not being utilized to their capacity, and in most communities not being used at all, because it's very difficult to get the residents to change out of a routine from a dining timing standpoint that if they've been in for a while. Yeah. But to be able to manage that flow into the dining room changes everything. So now I have servers who aren't taking 4 tables at once at 5:30 when the dining room opens, right? They're taking a table and they're getting that table started. 5 minutes later, they have their next table and so on. Now I have a server that can accommodate 40 residents during the course of a night rather than 20. And of course, then the flow coming into the kitchen slows down, becomes more steady. We can cook a la minute. We don't have to, hit the food so hard that it's panic mode. So that reservation system and technology that's available, and it's a part of many systems now that isn't even being used by many operators. I
have worked with many communities in teaching the residents how to use the reservation system, because it's a matter of technology adoption. Here's a way that you can do this even easier. And in the same regard, I do remember going to several communities and just seeing the queue, a big lineup of people at 4:30 ready to eat dinner, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so you know what you have to do to prepare for that, right? You've got to have staff lined up because they're going to get clobbered. The kitchen, essentially the food has to be done because the orders are going to come in so fast. They're just going to be plating. And we can eliminate all of that with just a reservation system. It's worth the investment and the time. But to your point, it is a difficult change, right? Teaching those residents how to use that system, how to follow it. But I will tell you this, those residents didn't move into your community knowing that they were going to sit at table 10 in position 2 every night with this friend and that friend, and that's just what they're going to do, right? We trained them. We allowed that process to happen. Well, we can also train them to utilize the reservation system too, right? It just takes time, and of course, leadership has to be on board and say, we are sticking with this. Here's what we're going to do, and we're making it real easy on them. I mean, we're going to start with merely 2 reservations, early or late, right? I mean, even if you start there, but allowing them to pick times and managing that flow, your operation will change completely. Can you think of a single restaurant that allows everyone to walk in at the same time and fill the dining room?
No.
Because it doesn't work. But yet we do it in senior living every day.
Right. So yeah, it's such a good point. David, when you're thinking about the senior living operator and the executive dining manager, and what's something that they can start anticipating or preparing for today in dining technology that will serve them over the next 10 years?
Well, the 10-year question is a tough one, because in the technology world, that's now 10 months. We will really see in 10 months a dining service director come to work on Monday morning and have all of his emails responses have been written, ready for him to okay and send. All of his reports on usage during the weekend, his order that needs to be placed this morning already done and put together, sitting on his computer that he can review and hit send. This is months away, not years away.
Yeah.
So, I mean, 10 years from now, I can't even imagine what it's going to look like. But with AI and with the equipment technology that we have, I mean, it's just changing by the year. It's so dramatic. But they're going to have so much information available to them as operators that it will, instead of being what everyone's scared of, is this tech-driven outcome, they will have so much technology that it can again be a people-driven outcome. And they are freed up to do their jobs. That technology will help us be more efficient. And in a tough job market, that's going to be a good thing.
100%.
So that those people can really be effective and have that engagement with the residents and make their lives, better today than it was tomorrow.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for innovating that whole process within dining at senior living communities. And what is the best way for someone to connect with you for more information?
Really, the best way, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to respond to any questions, thoughts, ideas, very open for interaction. So shoot me an email and I will respond. And I'd love to hear what people are talking about and what's going on out in the industry.
Well, thank you for joining us today. And for those of you who are joining us in the chat, thank you for your participation. Thank you to Leading Age Arizona for sponsoring this episode. And we will see you all right back here next Wednesday for another episode.